Before there was Fallout, there was Wasteland. In 1988, back when EA was still a gaming company that focused on its developers, as opposed to these days when they simply absorb them and shut them down when they don't sell well enough. Brian Fargo, lead director at Interplay, will release a computer game called Wasteland. A heavily menu and text-driven role-playing game, Wasteland told the story of an alternate reality where nuclear war between the US and Russia turned the world into a post-apocalyptic nightmare. Controlling a group of heroes known as the Desert Rangers, who you can name and assign skill points to, you would fight against the computer AI that had gone rogue. The gameplay was inspired by tabletop RPGs, and there were several stats ranging from weapons to climbing to swimming. Also, it was one of the first games to feature a persistent world, where at the very least, when you return to an area you had previously been in, it will remain just how you left it. You could also recruit non-player characters as party members. The game became a cult classic, and there will be a few attempts at a sequel. EA will release Fountain of Dreams, a game that, while it wasn't developed by Interplay, it was originally advertised as a sequel to Wasteland. Even though it contained similar themes, the link to Wasteland will be removed before launch. Just as well as the game would not be received well commercially or critically. Interplay would also develop Meantime, a game that used the same engine as Wasteland, although it will be completely unrelated due to the fact that it focused on time travel rather than the post-apocalypse. Unfortunately, the game will be cancelled due to the waning 8-bit computer market at the time, as they had been planning to develop the game for Apple II and Commodore 64. As you know, Interplay would break ties with EA eventually and create Fallout, which was the spiritual successor to Wasteland and contained many of the same themes. Fallout itself would go on to become a franchise on its own. Fast forward to 2012. The Fallout franchise had long since become the intellectual property of Bethesda, who released Fallout 3 and New Vegas. Almost a decade prior, however, Brian Fargo had reacquired the rights to the name Wasteland from Konami, who was using it as part of their Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game. He would go on to form inExile and express interest in reviving the property. Inspired by the success of Double Fine Adventure, aka Double Fine's Broken Age, he would have Wasteland 2 crowdfunded. The Kickstarter was successful, and Wasteland 2 was released in 2014 with a Game of the Year edition upgrade, along with Xbox One and PlayStation 4 releases the following year. The company would also crowdfund Torment, tied to Numeria, a spiritual successor to the classic role-playing game Planescape. Spurred on by the success of both Wasteland 2 and Torment, they will launch another crowdfunding effort for Wasteland 3 in 2016. This would also be a success. However, during development, something strange happened and they were acquired by Microsoft and added to its stable of first-party developers. Now with extra funding, an increased budget, and more resources, inExile was able to hire new team members while still keeping to its Kickstarter commitments. Not only was this game coming to PC and PlayStation 4, it was also coming to Xbox One, which it was anyway. Of course, the difference now is that it would also be available on Microsoft's Game Pass service. But should you play it? Let's find out.
Are your garments all spotless? Are they white as the snow? Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb? Is your soul all spotless? Is it clean as snow? Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb? I am washed. I am washed. I am washed in the blood of the Lamb.
Wasteland 3 traced the deserts of the previous two games, and indeed most games set in the post-apocalyptic setting, for the snowy mountains of Colorado. After the events of Wasteland 2, the Desert Rangers aren't doing so well. A man known as the Patriarch invites them to Colorado, promising aid in exchange for their services in a matter of his. However, once you arrive, things go south with a quickness. A gang of murderous hillbillies called the Dorseys attacks your squad. Most of them are killed, while you and a partner, both of whom you can either pick from a series of presets or create yourself, are among a handful of survivors. Once you make your way to the Patriarch, he informs you that he needs you to bring in his 3 offspring, Liberty, Valor, and Victory, and alive, as they are a threat to his rule. However, he still wants to reconcile with them. He gives you your own base, complete with personnel and recruits. Of course, your mission won't be a cakewalk, as there are different factions at work, and you'll find out that things aren't what they seem pretty quick. Like many RPGs, you'll build a squad of several members, 4 player-created characters including recruits, and 2 companions. Each character has several stats you can build and enhance. By enhancing these skills, you can unlock several perks. These skills include everything from melee, to guns, to lockpicking, explosives, and even toaster repair, which you should not sleep on because it is more valuable than you can imagine. The idea is to build a team of specialists, having members that excel at 1 or 2 skill sets, versus creating a jack-of-all-trades type character that's mediocre at all of them. If you played Wasteland 2, many of the skills have been consolidated. For instance, pistols and shotguns are now merged to the small arms skill, and likewise submachine guns and assault rifles fall under the umbrella of automatic weapons. Unfortunately, ammo is limited, in a strategy RPG game of all things. There are multiple ammo types, and it's hard to stock up on ammo in the early parts of the game. Therefore, it's important to manage your ammunition and keep track of whose weapon requires what type. I've had many times where I ran out of ammo without realizing it. You'll also have to reload during combat. This is going to be tedious, especially for new fans, but once you get it down, then you'll find a rhythm to it. During the overroad segments, you drive a huge truck that you can bring in some of the game's battles. You can upgrade it and customize it. Sadly, I don't get to use it a whole lot in combat, outside of the random encounters that pop up, although I had to upgrade it to pass through the radioactive gas. It's a shame too, because it can do a lot of damage in the outdoor battles when you outfit it with decent weapons. Even disregarding the car, you have several different options for combat. You have a choice of several different weapon types to use, from pistols to sniper rifles. You even have the option to engage in melee combat. Also, you can deploy robot companions, use grenades, Molotov cocktails, and even yellow snowballs. And yes, they're created the way you would imagine them to. If your animal whisper skill is high enough you can even charm a furry friend into fight alongside your group. There's even a limit break meter of sorts that allows you to unleash a devastating special attack when it's full. Of course, everything costs AP, so don't forget to figure cover into your attack plans. The inventory takes a streamlined approach. All weapons, items, and ammo are shared throughout all party members, and no one has their individual inventory beside whatever they have equipped. You don't have to worry about over-encumbrance either. Better still, when you get useless items, it will be indicated as junk, and its only purpose is to be quick sold at shops. Between you and me, you'll want to have at least one party member with a high barter skill. Each member has 2 quick slots and can increase their number either through perks or equipment, but during battle you can go into the inventory screen and swap out items without suffering an AP penalty. This makes things useful when you need to access first aid or change your equipment. Even with these streamlined features, things can get overwhelming, so don't be afraid to turn the difficulty down to recruit if you just want to experience the story. However, if you're a glutton for punishment, there are 4 difficulty levels you can choose from and an optional friendly fire option. Also, a permadeath option will be available as post-launch DLC, so whether you just want to cruise through the story, challenge yourself, or you're a masochist, the game has something for everybody. Any RPG worth its salt has a good investment in its world building, and thankfully Wasteland 3 is no different. There's a healthy amount of world building in the game. There are several factions at work, and your actions will determine how they treat you. Of course, you can't be all things to all people, so you're going to have to step on some toes here and there. For example, early on while exploring your new base, you encounter a group of refugees squatting there. You can either kick them out, leaving more room for the Rangers, or let them stay. The fair thing to do would be to let them stay, but that'll piss off the Rangers and lead the fights between the Rangers and the refugees. Another faction, the Monster Army, is a small faction on its last legs. Yet they run the Bazaar, a shopping center built in the remains of an abandoned mall. If you play your cards right, you can ally with the mob, and let them take over their operation. However, if you make nice with them, you can gain permanent discounts on their rares. Sometimes there's a visible advantage in siding with one group over the other. Other times it comes down to the type of person you are. If anything, it adds replay value to the game. Things often tend to get a bit unpleasant when you have to make some of these decisions. Early on in the game, I had to deal with a would-be deserter. Either kill them or let them go. Shortly, I'll meet up with another character who's so badly wounded that the only thing I can do for them is euthanize them, and that's if my first aid skill is high enough at that point. Yeah, there's some pretty heavy stuff in this game, but thankfully it's balanced out by the humor. This is a game where I'm agonized over my decision to abandon a family being slaughtered by the deranged hillbillies I mentioned earlier, in favor of defending a convoy delivering power armor to the Patriarch's marshals. But less than an hour later, I'm battling Mexican clowns that are attacking me with exploding pigs. And don't even get me started on the cult that worships an AI reconstruction of Ronald Reagan and the hippie robot commune that lives next to it. I only wish this writing extended to some of the characters a bit more. For instance, I don't get to learn too much about my companions outside of special dialogue now and then. Of course, they have their own motivations and allegiances, and they'll even leave me if I go against them, but for the most part, they're simply never part of my team. Out of the several companions I meet, there were only two in particular that I kept with me throughout the whole game, however, so maybe that might have had something to do with it. Still, it might have been worth it just to see some kind of Mass Effect style loyalty mission with them, just so I could gain some insight into their character. I also didn't feel that there was much insight on the Patriarch himself. I only get to meet him a few times during the game, and most of the information I learned about him came from other sources. There is an option to turn against him, and you'll have your reasons for doing so, but the game doesn't really hammer things home as much as it should. Still, this might be just me, as the game's writing otherwise is still solid when it comes to its world building. One good thing that really contributes to the game's uniqueness is the music. While most of it is your average post-apocalyptic battle and exploration music, you have several folk and country tunes that play during certain points of the game. The music really fits these particular scenes, and when you get to them, you'll know why. Also of note is the radio station that plays while you're exploring in the game's overworld. It's not as huge as Grand Theft Auto obviously, but it's got some pretty funny tunes. For instance, here's a remix of the Green Acres theme. Whether the music is driving home a big battle or just adding to the game's atmosphere, it's just as much a part of the package as everything else, including the world building. Hell, I would even say that the music itself is part of the game's world building. Also, it should be noted that the game's developers are committed to supporting and maintaining the game post-launch. Ever since the game's release, they've been addressing bugs that pop up and issuing patches for them. Thankfully, I haven't encountered very many bugs during my playthrough, and the few I have were nothing game-breaking. Also, they've pledged to issue more content for the game down the line, although squashing bugs is their main priority for the time being. It's good to see a developer committed to taking this kind of pride in its product and listening to its community. Way different from these live service games that release in a buggy, broken state while its developer promises new content only for it to languish while its player base dwindles. Well, it's time for the million-dollar question. Should you play it? Yes. Yeah, the limited ammo tends to make things a bit more tedious than they need to be. It could have done a better job of character development, and I wish I could use the car in combat a lot more than I did. Still, these are minor issues. There are lots of skills and options for character builds, a ton of replay value, a unique soundtrack, excellent world building, and a great mix of seriousness and humor in the writing. Better still, the developers are constantly working on bug fixes and post-launch DLC. Wasteland 3 is one of those games that lets you approach it in any way you want and rewards you for it, and that's the hallmark of any good RPG. Not only is inExile hard at work on new content for Wasteland 3, but new games as well, including new RPGs. With the new Fable, Obsidian's Avowed, and not to mention the acquisition of Bethesda, the Xbox ecosystem is fast becoming the place to be if you want quality computer-style role-playing games. inExile will become an increasingly bigger part of that, and if Wasteland 3 is any indication, they're going to be the developers to watch for if you like old-school RPG gaming. Anyway, that's another edition of Should You Play It? Let me know what you think in the comments below. Also, click the thumbs up icon if you like what you just saw. I got plenty more where that came from, just check out the links below. Also, hit that subscribe button and click the little bell icon so you'll be notified whenever I put out a new video. Also, make sure you follow me on Twitter at ScrewfaceCapone and also Twitch, also ScrewfaceCapone. I do game streams every Thursday night at 9 p.m. So, that's it. Have a great week, and I hope to see you again. Until next time, I'm Lottie 51000G, kinfolk.
Who more than self their country love and mercy